With the introduction of the mortar cannons, grenades actually have been resurrected and offer a very fun, almost AFK playstyle that not only demolishes bosses, but is also screen clearing AoE in maps. So how the mortar cannon works, you can read it up right here in the max roll planner that is also going to be linked down in the description below. That is going to have all of the information necessary. Here you can see the skills, the passive tree, the equipment, and everything necessary to copy and follow this build guide. So for the mortar cannon, you can see that it comes with its own elemental and chaos resistances, which also makes it so that the levels are very important on the mortar cannon for its defense. And then on top of that, the supported grenade skills have 100% increased cooldown recovery rate, which makes it so that the cooldown is basically half as long. And on top of that, you suffer from, or the supported skills suffer from 50% less attack speed and 50% less damage for the grenades. In the mortar cannon, we put the explosive grenades. These are supported by multi-shot so that we generate more grenades every time the mortar shoots, and payload to give those grenades a 50% chance to be activated a second time, basically giving us tons of additional damage. These are basically the staple that you cannot choose and remove. So we have basically a stable 4-link here with that setup, and then we have two supports that are changeable whenever you need them. Most of the time while you are mapping, even on the map bosses, you are going to run the short fuse, heavily reducing the time until the grenade pops, so you have way more instant damage and you don't have to wait until a pack dies when you put down your mortar. And you have magnified area 2, which is heavily increasing the area of the explosive grenade, making it much easier to cover the whole screen and therefore clear packs during mapping. As I said, these two are a little bit of a free-for-all here. You can kind of like mix and match what you want to do with it. This is the setup that I use in maps and on bosses. So for example, when I would fight T4 Zesht or Arbiter, for example, I would change these two to Conk effect and fire attunement, leaving payload, scattershot, mortar cannon, and explosive grenade always as a staple, and then basically changing the last two. Then on top of that, to supplement all of this, we are using gas grenade, which is also giving us a ton of additional damage right here with our 528, which we can just chuck in and shoot, for example, on bosses. Absolutely not necessary on the clear. On the clear, you're legit just running around, putting down a mortar cannon and going to the next pack. Then we also have oil grenade, which basically is there to apply exposure with the strip away or potent exposure right here. We are increasing that effect. And then with magnified area, we are increasing the area, obviously. Then on top of that, we have the persistent ground number 3 or rank 3, which then also applies 30% less cooldown recovery rate to everything that is covered in the oil. And then we reduce the mana costs of the oil grenade. Then also what we're going to use is the explosive shot with Nova projectiles, which is going to fire 4 additional projectiles in a circle around you, but make explosive shot deal less damage, which is absolutely no problem because our main source of damage is the mortar cannon or the explosive grenade shooting out of the mortar cannon. This is basically just used to trigger grenades that are flying a little bit off and to detonate those. For this, we use magnified area to increase the coverage and the likelihood of us hitting maybe another grenade that flew a little bit to the side. Then we have nimble reload because explosive shot only has one bolt, so to speak. And then we use the fire attunement to basically get the damage up a little bit. Then we're also going to have a leap slam as a weapon swap so that you can jump out of sticky situations if you want. Currently, the ancestral spirits from the Warbringer ascendancy do not work with our mortar cannons, but this will hopefully get fixed in the future. Here we're going to run a lot of supporty stuff where we can get Culling Strike, Pin, and Maim. And the ancestral spirits themselves are also supporting. They give you buffs, various forms. They increase the damage, the defenses. They also apply slows. And then for the spirits, we use attrition and scavenge plating. Attrition is a little bit of a free for all right now. I'm trying to come up with a better idea for this, but nevertheless, this is going to heavily boost your single target damage against rare and uniques the longer you fight against them. And scavenge plating is basically a 40% more multiplier to your armor that is basically permanently active, because due to the Warbringer passives, you are going to be breaking armor all of the time. Speaking of Warbringer, the passive tree, right, looks like this. As you can see right here, we are going for the Warbringer passive because we are in need of Anvil's Weight, which makes it so that you break 10% armor of the hit damage that you deal, basically giving you the ability to break with every form of damage. And then we are also having imploding impacts, which makes it so that you can break armor to below 0. This is capped by the initial targets, by the target's initial amount of baseline armor. So if they usually have 5k armor, you can go into the negative by 5k, heavily increasing your damage, because we are also coupling that with the Molten One's gift. This basically makes it so that we're not only increasing the effect of the fully broken armor, but the fully broken armor now also applies to fire damage taken from hits, which is basically our main source of damage. Then on the other ascendancy for the Warbringer, we are needing the Answered Call, because we get one more summoned totem that way. And we're going for Wooden Wall as our last ascendancy points to basically have 20% damage reduction all of the time. Then you can see we're going for tons of two-handed weapon damage with a little bit of totem damage, extra fire damage right here, more two-handed damage. We get the cluster bombs, because that way we get +1 projectile, and we don't really get the negative of the grenade detonation time. It's probably a bug because we put these into the mortar cannon. This is not affected by that. So you can basically only get +1 proj for the grenades. We use the presence present because we're basically always surrounded by an ally, which are our totems. Then you would go and collect all the stuff here at the bottom. Molten One's gift being extremely good, with also the stuff on the way here. More grenade stuff, more area stuff, more fire stuff. And actually then pathing towards the repeating explosive to gain 15% chance to activate a second time. This together with payload gives you a 65% chance for every grenade to be activated a second time, obviously boosting your damage tremendously. Then we take the Giant Slayer thing here. Then we don't need the armor break node. That's just a remnant from past idea. And we're going to go and get the Forces of Nature. Then last but not least, the armor also applies to elemental damage. I have now heavily leaned into this stat with the gear. So in the gearing, you can see an import of my current character. And as you can see right here, I have tons of armor applies to elemental damage. The only slot where I don't have this yet are the boots, because they are basically covering my chaos res a little bit here, and I didn't get around to upgrade those. Basically everything, my chest, my helmet, my gloves, all have armor applies to elemental damage, and this basically makes it so that we are certainly taking less elemental damage. The problem with this stat is, though, that this is before resistances. So if we would take 1,000 elemental damage, for example, this is basically calculated before the resistances. So not so basically this would remove, I don't know, maybe 100 elemental damage, and then those remaining 900 would be reduced by 75%. So obviously you would want to have this the other way for this stat to be much more effective. But the good thing about this is that you can stack a ton of this stat. Basically everywhere you can get 40%, which is then actually equating to a pretty okay number. And you can definitely feel it as soon as you start putting 2 or better 3 of these stats on your items. Obviously, you are not as tanky as, for example, a evasion-based character. But if you're looking to play armor, this is certainly a must-have, even though it is not the most efficient way of building a defense, but with the Warbringer, it's actually not the greatest idea to path over to the evasion part of the tree, because we would just be losing too much armor, too many passive points, and then going for stuff like this where it's like hybrid armor evasion is not really the case. So I really wanted to focus down on armor, see how it actually plays out, and it's actually not that bad if you include the new stats on at least 2 to 3 of your item pieces, better 4 of them. So you tune that number as high as you can. Then basically very easy gearing. You just focus on armor and maximum life, apart from fixing your resistances and getting the armor applies to elemental damage on your gear. For the rings, you want to have some form of flat damage. You want to, well, further fix your resistances. And for the amulet, for example, you could go for level of all projectile skills. A little bit of increased armor is also not going to hurt here. And then some max life. As you can see, the pattern basically follows through with just max life, reses, and then the armor on the armor items. And the armor also applies to elemental damage. For the amulet, your anoint for now is the heavy ammunition, which just gives you 40% increased projectile damage. Then for your weapon, it is extremely important that you get a cannonade crossbow base. This is going to allow you to get 1 more additional projectile on your grenades, and then it's just pretty straightforward with just increasing the physical damage of the cannonade crossbow by as much as you can. You do this by getting the high IPD here at the top, flat physical damage roll, and then if you can, you would want to also have as basically a best slot the hybrid Fizz accuracy rating roll to boost that physical damage number up as high as you can, which then obviously scales all of the rest. For the suffixes, you really want to have the level of all projectile skills, but beware, don't overshoot it where you go and do +7, because that is going to unnecessarily increase the amount of mana that you spend for your skills. And then obviously we do have the new desecrated modifiers, where you do have stuff like grenades have a chance to activate a second time, further boosting that value to basically up to 90%, which is an absurd number when it comes to damage for the grenade build. You also have some of those prefixes with, for example, grenade skills have +1 cooldown use, but again, the prefixes should ideally be focused on increasing your physical damage as much as you can and not really wasting, so to speak, those on these two right here. For the suffixes, ideally, if you can get one with a chance to activate a second time, that is phenomenal, but is obviously going to be very expensive. Now, for the next steps that I have in mind for the build are stuff of like the Valakos Vice, for example, because as you can see at the bottom, it says 100% of fire damage is converted to lightning damage. We would do that because, well, fire damage is ignite and ignite sucks, whereas lightning damage is shock, and shock is a huge DPS boost if you play it correctly. We would basically do some stuff right here at the bottom where we can get some more lightning nodes, which also enables much better pathing to the forces of nature, for example. And then we would have to change the pathing a little bit, because we are not gonna make characters burn anymore, so we would need to adjust that. So that would be one way of changing the build. And then also in the helmet slot, we do have the constricting command helmet, which you can see has the unique mod of requiring fewer enemies to be surrounded, and this can roll to up to 5, which means that if you take a look at this tree, the surrounded affix or the surrounded mod means that you need to have 5 enemies within 3 meters of you, and if you subtract 5 of those, this means this is going to be permanently active. And with that helmet, you could actually gain access to very big additive attack damage numbers right here where we are anyway, which would mean that the attack damage while surrounded would be active. Right here, we could take this if we want and also get 100% increased attack damage while surrounded, and then also tactical retreat, which would be a nice quality of life addition. For the POB, I also have the export right here in the planner if you like looking at that a little bit more, or you can also go ahead and check out the passive tree right here. But for the POB, you can see that I have set up a little bit of configuration here with the mortar cannon, trying to basically simulate that a little bit here with the increased cooldown, recovery rate, less attack speed, and less damage. Because the mortar cannon is currently not in the POB, I would not really rely to 100% on the POB. But here you can see basically what I would be doing at the very end of the build, and then also have the the gear that I currently use on the items tabs right here. And if you're curious why the high velocity rounds cluster blaster with tons of cluster grenades did not work, you can find the reason in the explanation of Riven armor right here. Here you can see that Riven armor is a debuff inflicted by hits that stores a portion of damage, pre-mitigation physical hit damage actually, and stores that on an enemy. But the problem basically is this sentence right here. The inflictor's subsequent attack hits against the target will gain additional unscalable added physical damage equal to that magnitude that is mentioned here at the top. So that is the exact problem. The inflictor's subsequent attacks, which is not our totems. This basically killed the mortar cluster blaster instantly. But I am very happy with the fallback that I had in case this would happen, which is the explosive grenades and the mortar cannons.
I knew it!
Holy. Holy, almost got clapped by the ball before the fight even began. I will keep tinkering with the mortar cannons and the explosive grenades because I'm actually having fun with not having to deal with the cooldown of the explosive grenades and basically just putting down a mortar and then going into the next pack. I feel like this build is phenomenal to play because not only can you just put down your damage and keep moving forward, but also you do not have to think a lot about any uptime or anything. You're just screen clearing with the right click and then keep going to the next pack. If you want to see that develop further live, then I suggest you check out the Twitch. That is going to be linked down in the description below. And if you like content similar to this, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I'll see you next time.